Welcome to the Low-Carb MD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD podcast. Tro, man, I missed you last week. We were too busy to connect.
Yeah, it's okay. Today we're back, and I'm excited.
We're gonna make up for it. We're gonna make up for it today.
100%, man. 100%. How are you?
Can't complain, man.
Well, you can, but
I can. No one listens. It doesn't matter. You know, I tried complaining about stuff, but you know, what are you gonna do?
So today I'm actually excited. I've been meaning to get him on the podcast. I looked.
It's been way too long. Way too long. We've been waiting.
I looked and I asked him about a year and a half ago. So we're happy we got Bob Collins on. And just a little about Bob Collins, because he's a humble man and he won't say it. He spent 25 years serving the New York City area in law enforcement. He responded to Ground Zero. He's also sort of the director of the diabetes front with the Lions Club here in Westchester, which is a county outside of New York City. And he has been vocal about his battle with cancer and prostate cancer. And he found metabolic health a number of years ago, lost 80 pounds, kept it off. And to be honest, he inspires me. You know, every day, you know, sort of like Jocko, he's posting, you know, pictures of his workout on the app, and just absolutely inspire me to keep going. So I'm happy to have you here, Bob. We've met a number of times, and you're like a family member here, so it's a little bit more special to have you here. I know your story. I know it's one that's going to be inspiring, but I think, you know, you're going to inspire a number of people, so I'm happy to have you here.
I appreciate that, Tro. It's an actual honor to be here, to be asked to be part of this, and finally meet Brian.
Yeah, and I'm outnumbered with two New Yorkers, so I'm going to be low profile on this one, I think.
I'm not.
That's been happening a lot lately, hasn't it, Troy? I got to get some West Coast people on here. But Bob, it's an honor to have you on. I love your story and what you've been through and what you're doing, and your positivity online. And so, yeah, share your secrets with us.
Not really a secret, but so it actually started about 7 years ago when the doctor I was seeing wanted me to lose weight, told me to lose weight. And at the time, I was one of her patients for 20 years. She was my GP, but I was also seeing her for a chronic Lyme disease and co-infections. So subsequently, I was being treated aggressively with IV treatments pretty much every day for 5 years, just before keto and low carb. So, but she wanted me to lose weight, but never told me how. She wanted to put me on statin, gave me warnings, things like that. So it was probably December of 2016. I was reading a book by Tim Ferriss called Tools of Titans. And I started to notice a common theme in that book about all these captains of industry losing weight or being in a state of ketosis and talking about a ketogenic lifestyle or low carb. And that intrigued me. So then I started going down the rabbit hole, whatever I could find online, YouTube. You know, you talk about YouTube being the greatest teacher. And that's where I found my info. So I said, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I tried every other diet, lifestyle intervention, from lean cuisines to low fat to Nutrisystem to Shakeology. And maybe they had some success, but not a lot. So in March of 2017, I started my lifestyle change. So what my wife and I did, we actually went through our refrigerator and our cabinets to discard anything that didn't fit the lifestyle and or donate. And then the journey began at home. So I started the the nutrition aspect. And I always knew fitness was going to be part of it. And in my house, I had a treadmill and a rebounder. And that's where I started. That's how it all started, Tro and Brian, with in my basement of my house. Because basically I was too embarrassed to go to a gym. I was too heavy. I was 240 pounds and didn't like the way I looked. So that was a big part of it.
People don't realize the power of that sort of shame and embarrassment. I mean, if I could tell you, I didn't want to walk into the gym. In fact, if I walked into the gym, I didn't want to look anybody in the face. I mean, I didn't want to go on a plane. I didn't want to go to a carnival. I didn't want to go to a movie theater. I didn't want to go to the dentist. I didn't want to go to the doctor, right? Why? Because you got to fit into that chair at the doctor, and the doctor's just going to say, go eat less. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about that embarrassment a little bit, because, I think it's underappreciated. People don't realize how paralyzing that could be for somebody on their journey.
Yeah. So, it's funny looking back on photos over the past years prior to this journey. I was always that person who would stand in the back of a group photo, right? I didn't want to be in the front. I was embarrassed about that. And quite honestly, almost embarrassed to go to the doctor from time to time, because they're going to see me in really my natural state. And I was like, this is not the way I want to be. So, yeah. So that's why I started at home in the gym, in my home gym, albeit a treadmill and a rebounder. And I had known and read also that in terms of being a cancer thriver now, that a rebounder would help, at least from what I read, my lymphatic system and moving all that stuff in there to help my body.
I bet I bet you were just looking for somewhere to get started without the shame and guilt, and is a rebounder it's like a sort of like in between a stepper and a treadmill? Is that what that is?
No, it's a mini trampoline.
Yeah, it's a little trampoline. I know, I've seen those. Yeah, my aunt used to have one of those. Like, you can run up and down on it with less impact, to get started, so you don't hurt yourself.
Yeah. So, to that point, Brian, too, I have, in terms of maybe a little PTSD from wanting to run anymore, because I had torn my Achilles, one of my Achilles in 2008, and I was very trepidatious about trying to run again. So I figured that would be less impact, and that was my way of beginning. And to this day, I've graduated from rebounder to an elliptical. I will not. I know Tro loves to run, but I will not. I won't run anymore. I'll just do an elliptical.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I like to run, but I do a couple days on the stepper. I have no problem getting on the assault bike. I got no problem swimming, right? So there's no shame in
it's just moving, whatever you enjoy doing. I want to step back to a point you guys both made, and do you think it's more of a perception that we have going into the gym? Because I know sometimes I go in and the free weight area, I'm like, these guys are all hulks, and like they all look like Sean Baker. It's like, okay, I'm like the rookie guy compared to these guys. But do you think that it's mostly in our own heads that we think that, like, everyone I've seen at the gym has been super supportive and nice to, they know people are trying and they appreciate that they're trying? Or Tro, you don't see it that way? You're in New York and I'm in California, so it might be different here. You guys don't see it that way at all, huh?
I may see it a little different way than Tro does. Go ahead, Tro.
So I think it can be intimidating, and it is a little bit in our heads. But let me tell you, people are cruel. I mean, I hear it just to give you a sense of how it is simultaneously in our own heads, but also very much the external world. I was in the gym, and this was early on. This is like 7 years ago, maybe. And I think I told you this story, Brian. Somebody was cracking a joke about a fat person, even though I had lost 100 pounds.
When you talked about that, that's why you're my co-host. When you said this, I was like, okay, this is the guy. Yeah, he might be a little rough.
I'm like, even though I was 100 pounds down and I looked good or whatever, I still felt it. And so, well, what's the chicken or the egg? Certainly my own mental health plays a factor in my own outlook, but those statements are there. And, especially in a gym setting where, people are wearing revealing clothings, and I think there are absolutely amazing people out there. In fact, the bigger somebody is, I found, the more helpful they are, the more better their physique is, and it's like the truly exceptional people in the gym in terms of physique and ability, they're usually the kindest. That's what I've seen. It's everybody sort of in between, that can be a little rough.
I agree with that, Tro, too. But like for me, for example, as a kid growing up and, going through all those weight fluctuations as a kid, I was never that kid who would go to the gym because I was intimidated by those gym bros, by my fellow teenagers who, look hulking and they had their muscles out of their shirts, and I was never that kid. So I got a little intimidated by that. But there comes a point in time when, I guess through age, didn't matter. It didn't matter. So that's how I kind of returned to the gym. It didn't matter to me. So after a couple of months at home in my little workout area at home, my wife convinced me, hey, why don't you join a gym? Let's go. So we did. I did. And I think I got the 2X shirt that they give you when you join. But I started doing my own thing, started using the free weights, started using the machines, and then it was off to the races, and just stay focused on myself and my journey. And
that takes a lot of courage, like to go from your basement on that bouncer, right? Yeah. Struggling with your own weight to struggling with chronic Lyme. Like, I mean, you're sort of in a vulnerable place there, right? And then your wife's like, no, we got this. Yeah. So what, it's a lot of times I don't say this, and Rosette, if you're listening to me, it's the wives, right, that really can help guide us and push us in that right direction.
And you know what's funny about what you guys said, what you said, Tro? I was thinking about it. It's like, so we've interviewed some of the best, right? Like Professor Noakes and Gary Fetke. And it seems like a lot of these people, when they succeed at such a high level, and they have nothing to prove anymore, and they're super cool and down to earth, and they don't have to use big words and try to intimidate you and say, I know better than you do. Look at how many letters I have after my name. It's the same thing in the gym. I think like what you're saying is people who are confident in themselves and happy with themselves and feel like they're doing the best. They want to help other people to be where they're at. I think that's kind of what we all have in common too. It's like, I want to help people to do better. Like, not go, oh, I know better than you do, listen to me or you're an idiot. That kind of mentality in the gym too. You see it. But I think in general, those people who are making fun of other people are the insecure people, and they figure if they tear someone else down, they look better. Right.
Right. Absolutely. For sure. It's funny. So, I would go to the gym. I would do, so my normal work day, post law enforcement has been, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 usually. So after I was still going through my Lyme disease treatments, so I would sit in an infusion chair.
Oh, did we lose him? Hopefully he comes back.
You guys have been having rain and storms and all that stuff. We'll give Bob a minute to come back.
To the gym.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Sorry, we cut out for a second.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit. Let's start again. You were in your chair.
So I was in the infusion chair. So after work, going through my Lyme treatment, and an hour to an hour and a half to 3 hours later. So it's like 7 o'clock at night. I go home, change, and go to the gym because I knew this was an integral part of my lifestyle change for me. So I wouldn't get home till after 10 at night, take a shower, go to sleep, and rinse, repeat, work the next day. And then the day after that, do the same thing for the gym until, I had a change in schedule. Now my times are different, but, it was funny going through this and being challenged by my general practitioner, my GP. I started losing weight, and it was a few months, and some of the other patients were noticing, and then the doctor finally said to me, Bob, are you okay? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, are you? It's like, well, you're losing weight. She was concerned. She was the one who actually found my cancer. So she was concerned that my cancer came back. I said, no, I'm doing what you tell me to do. I'm losing weight. And she really didn't ask me how I was doing it until a few months after that. And I knew, so, we all go through this. Like, I got to tell her, I'm doing a modified Mediterranean diet, until.
That works, right? That
Well,
works.
can I just say something? It's kind of funny. It's sort of like I talk about my family in a loving way, but I was at a recent gathering and I'm not eating some of the foods that are around. I'm being very picky about what I choose. And one of my aunts who I love, and I know she loves me, she says, "Oh, you're still doing that thing. It's almost 10 years I've been doing that thing." But the minute I would the minute I would gain weight, I remember she'd say like, "Oh, you should go on a diet." And then now you're on a diet and everybody's like, "Well, you're still on that thing?" Like, "Oh, have a little bit." Here your doctor is. Your doctor's like, "Well, look, you got cancer. We got to get you healthy, or we got to get you to lose weight." And the minute you lose weight, they're like, "What's going on here?" It's kind of funny to think about
and I want to
that.
take a quick step back, Bob. What were your symptoms and what made Lyme disease come to the forefront? Because I think it's missing a lot of people, and there's a lot of people suffering that they just go, "Oh, you're just depressed, you're tired." So what made you seek help, and how did they find it?
Yeah. So, what do they call Lyme disease? The great mimicker, it could mimic up to 200 other diseases. So this doctor in particular, she's pretty good. She's in terms of infectious disease. So she knew what blood tests to do. But in addition to the blood tests, it was the symptoms. So it was brain fog. It was really not being able to stay on task too much. It was in some cases like higher blood pressure, and so subsequently also. So I was one of those guys that had the metabolic syndrome. So I had low HDL, high cholesterol, all the things that go with that. So through her diagnosis and through her questioning, she drilled down that, hey, not only was it Lyme, but there's a couple other co-infections going on here. So that was one end of the spectrum to treat it with antibiotics and aggressive antibiotics. And there was one time I can remember being at Thanksgiving and I was going through my treatment and we had just finished the Thanksgiving meal. And my family, we were all sitting around. And I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And they're like, "What?" "Well, we got to get to the hospital." So, these are my symptoms, blah, blah, blah. Go to the hospital. And not saying this happens for everybody, but all my blood work came back fine. But what it was I was having what's called, a Herxheimer reaction to the Lyme and to the Lyme treatment. And that's all it was, so just very, very scary for sure, because since heart disease runs in my family, my dad had 3 heart attacks and open heart surgery. And his side of the family, my uncles were very heavy, obese. So I was trying to beat that. So very concerned about that. So Brian, that was part of my symptoms with Lyme, which is very good in terms of coming up with a differential, I guess, for Lyme and the co-infections.
Yeah, and sometimes the treatment you can get worse for a while. And that's true. You get the Herxheimer reaction. I had it with a parasite infection that I had from doing overseas work, and yeah, it's legit. It's legit bad stuff for sure. So it's just be able to get through the treatment and get everything kind of calmed down and good. And so you also had the big risk factor of being in law enforcement. Shift work, high stress. I was surprised when I was looking at the effects of stress and sleep, and how many cancers are highly correlated with that. Prostate cancer being one of them, colon cancer being another, with shift work and high stress levels.
Yeah, Brian. So yeah, we did. So I started out in federal law enforcement with Secret Service, and then moved on to local law enforcement. So I moved from Washington D.C. back up home here in New York. But when I was doing down in Washington and up here, I was definitely doing shift work, and that. I'll tell you what, that takes a toll on you, and we were changing every week. So we work a day shift, a 3-11 shift, and a midnight shift, all on a rotation. So you talk about just trying to get your life together and that taking years off your life. It could be very, very distressing for sure.
Yeah, I think I think the impact of sleep, stress is underappreciated. But I want to come back also, you had these medically unexplained symptoms. I think that's another aspect of, sort of medicine that most doctors don't know how to handle. And I'm surprised your medical team actually handled it, right? Like if a patient's having symptoms and we don't know where it's coming from, most docs just don't know what to do. And then they start to blame the patient. Maybe you're depressed. Brian was saying this, like, right? What are the things that docs do, right? You're depressed, or maybe you're a hypochondriac, or you're making it up, but there could be something really underlying, just escapes the bounds of our knowledge, right? We don't know anything. So I'm surprised you had this medical team that was willing to sort of figure this out with you. I think that's a beacon of hope, at least,
It is, and I got to say, so Tro, you've met my wife, so my wife actually still works for that. My wife works for that doctor, so yeah, so it's good in that respect for sure. But I needed somebody to be open-minded, to accept what I was doing, and once I actually told her what I was doing, she was concerned and wanted me to go to cardiologist. And I said, all right, I'll go to a cardiologist. And I said, is this cardiologist open and accepting as to my lifestyle now? Right. So, yeah. So I actually brought, I don't know, it was about 7 papers to my doctor. And I said, please get these to the cardiologist before I see that cardiologist, so we're on the same page. Okay. So I go to the cardiologist, and I want to do the first thing the doctor says to me, and please, no disrespect. Doctor says, I have 2 types of patients here. I have statin patients or surgical patients. We're going to see where you are. Okay. All right. So we went through the standard talk and go through blood panel and draw blood. And actually, I wanted a CAC, and that was one of the tests that the doc was willing to give me. But when I told the doc, the lifestyle talked about that, the doc told me, we've heard this all before. Well, what you're doing is unsustainable. And I turned and said to the doctor, well, what's unsustainable about eating real food? And there was no reply. And then one of the other things that really got me aggravated was this doc particularly said, well, look what happened to Dr. Atkins. And I said, what happened to Dr. Atkins? Please tell me. Oh, yeah. He had a heart attack. I said, actually, that's incorrect. And I went through what happened with Dr. Atkins, and that was that. So
well, even back then, doctors didn't believe in myocarditis, it seems, which is what he had, He had myocarditis. So will we get censored for that one?
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
It's just mild though, Tro.
Yeah.
Mild heart scarring.
Yeah.
But so the doctor ordered my CAC, and I asked the doctor, I said, do you mind me asking if you've had this done and what your score was? And he kind of like proudly said, sure, that's fine. I have 0. And he said, all right, well, when you get your results back, we'll talk about what your changes will be. And I got my results about a week later, and I got an email from that doc, and he said, congratulations, Mr. Collins, your score is 0. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll see you in a year. So that was that. Yeah.
I find it interesting, Brian. I have 2 types of patients. His comment, right? The doctor's comment. I have 2 types of patients. Those on statins and those getting surgery. What do you think about that?
We know that's not true. I mean, we know it's not true. We all have had patients on statins who had multiple bypass and heart attacks and all these things. So the problem is the doctors don't talk about lifestyle and stress enough, and all these other factors that are involved in high insulin levels and metabolic disease. Because the question I always ask the cardiologist is, why is it that every diabetic has to be on a statin drug? Why? Well, they're at increased risk. Okay, but why? Why are they at increased risk over anyone else in the world? And there's no answer ever given for that, right? Unless you look at what Rob Sivas's data and some of these other data showing you, look, high insulin, high sugars, and this Colombian study that I quote all the time, the biggest risk factor they had by 700% increased risk of cardiovascular disease was high insulin level. But how many of these cardiologists have checked in insulin? Never. And that's why when you have, like people like Philip Ovadia coming along saying, look, I'm not doing bypass surgeries on people with, they can have high LDL or low LDL. But what I can tell you is they're going to have high triglycerides, low HDL, and high insulin levels. So we have to start looking at that and saying, okay, let's look at the most likely cause, the most likely problem. And also, I would say, look, if you're going to put people on statin drugs, I'm not anti-statin, and we've had these conversations. The point is, if you don't talk about cutting carbohydrates when you put on a statin, you're going to raise insulin and sugar levels, and we already know that. Like that's a side effect that we see. So you have to at least talk about lifestyle. You can't just it's the same way we manage diabetes. Like, just throw insulin out, make the sugars go lower. Yeah, but what happens to the patient? That's what Jason Fung was saying. Is like, the patient's dying, but their sugars look good. Okay, great. What are we accomplishing?
Yeah, I can't agree. I have to absolutely agree. Whether you're going down the path of drugs or lifestyle or both depends on the patient and the patient's risk. Some patients come to me and say, I don't want to be on drugs. You had no problem taking a drug. You took drugs for your chronic symptoms of Lyme for years. It's not like you got a drug problem,
Right.
it's like, but yet, when it comes to, addressing lifestyle, people, doctors get a little bit myopic.
Yeah.
Right.
And, by the way, what I forgot to mention was that I was on medication for GERD, for acid reflux. I was on high blood pressure medication. So I wasn't anti-medicine, so to speak, but geez, I needed some other intervention to really combat what my body was going through. So, that was my next best option, was to turn to just restricting carbs and reducing carbs, and then throw in later intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, and then the compounder was the exercise. So, I tried to use an old police analogy. If you shotgun something with all those smaller interventions, something's got to work. Something's going to hit the target. So at some point, maybe all three of those hit the target for me.
Yeah, then you can wean back what you don't need anymore. You don't need the shotgun every time, right? You can use a pistol sometimes for the job.
Right. So Brian too. So to that point, so I did probably a bad thing. I titrated myself off my medications with my blood pressure medication, my GERD, and eventually my symptoms of Lyme dissipated and they're gone. So I'm essentially off everything now, and have been for 6 years, or a little less than 6 years. So,
well, it's an interesting thing, Bob, when I'm looking at it, is like one thing that I've noticed, and I wish I could go back and check now, but I would always have this brain fog, fatigue, patients complaining of all these things, these constellation of symptoms that could fit in Lyme category. Mm-hmm. But what we found was when they, like fibromyalgia stuff too, got better on a low carb diet. And there's studies showing that people with fibromyalgia, if they take metformin, they would get better. And it made no sense to me at the time. I go, what does that have to do with fibromyalgia? It's a diabetes drug. What is it doing for inflammation? Well, if you lower your inflammation, those things get better and your blood pressure might get better. And so I think we're going through a spectrum, because one of my big concerns is chronic inflammation. When I see people with a high CRP recurrently, and I've seen it enough times in my practice, and I know the mechanism of what's happening is people lose 100 pounds and all of a sudden they have high blood pressure now after losing 100 pounds. There's no way that's going to happen physiologically. That doesn't make sense. But if they have high inflammatory markers, then it makes sense, right? And so we're seeing a lot. I don't know if you're seeing it, Tro, but I'm seeing a lot of hypertension in people that never had hypertension. They're 52 or 68 now, all of a sudden they have hypertension for the first time in their life.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think your point is spot on, Brian. And it's this holistic approach also that's missing from modern medicine, right? And if you go back to Bob's story, he got hit with one thing after another, right? And the question becomes he had to start to take ownership over his own journey, right? And he had to find doctors that got out of his way, right? And they had to find doctors who were curious, like you are, to figure out what is it, what's driving, what is it? Is it inflammation? It's interesting. You brought up inflammation, Brian. One of the drugs we talked about, statins. One of the drugs recently being explored for heart disease is bempedoic acid, which happens to lower inflammatory markers by about 1 point, right? The CRP goes down by a point. It showed that potentially it may lower mortality in people who were pretty sick. And there's this big fervor over colchicine, a drug used for myocarditis, by the way. It's an anti-inflammatory drug also used for gout. And this is an anti-inflammatory drug that is now being used for heart disease. So for years, we heard this whole LDL, statins, LDL, and all of a sudden now we have two drugs that are targeting inflammation, like you said, and it's like all the lipidologists are like, yeah, of course, heart disease is about inflammation. Well, that's not exactly what the focus has been for 50 years, and it's not what the focus has been. Did your cardiologist talk to you about inflammation when you went to them, Bob?
Not at all. Not at all. No, no. So, yeah. So, it's like you talk about. It's about getting a good team behind you and finding and being. I'm of the opinion we have to be our own best advocate, so we always have to advocate for ourselves. And this was me advocating for myself. I said I needed to change the paradigm a little bit, and that was the path I chose. Yeah.
And do you think the exercise had a role? Like, do you think that was a big role in the weight loss? Is that what was the big trigger for you, you think?
I think so, Brian. So when I started, I was 240 pounds. And so that was March of 2017. And by December of 2017, 9 months later, I was down to 175 pounds. So
that was with exercise without big dietary change.
So that was exercise and the dietary change. So that was a little over 7 pounds a month. So I don't think without the exercise, for me anyway, because I always knew exercise was going to be part of it, but I didn't know how much it was going to be a part of me or how much I was going to lose. I mean, once I was happy to get to 200 pounds from 240. And then when I got under 200, I said, well, let me see how much more this goes. And it just kept going and going. And like, all right, so now I'm down to 190. And then it kept going to, 165. I'm like, okay, that's enough. So it was, I think the exercise, just the movement, the activity was a big factor for me. And like I said, I always knew it was going to be part of it, that was going to be part of my routine and part of my lifestyle, because both my parents passed away at 71 years old, and from illnesses. One had cancer, the other had heart disease, and like I said, I have a family history of heart disease. I need to make it past 71, which is 10 years from now. So I need to make it past that. So I know, for hook or by crook, I got to beat that, and exercise being one of the ways, in addition to the nutrition and the lifestyle, for sure.
Yeah, and I have a slide on exercise, and I say it's useless except if you care about it. And there's like 50 things that are, that improve, and metabolic health being one of them. Decreased risk of Parkinson's and dementia, and all that, like you name it, depression, anxiety, stress. And so it's amazing when we don't have time. It's one of the things that's come up lately where I have some people that if they just meditate for 15 minutes a day, they sleep all night and they do great and everything gets better, but they just don't have time to do it. So all my Buddhist friends or patients I've talked to, they always bring up this joke that's a Buddhist thing that they go, okay, I need you to meditate for 20 minutes a day And the guy's like, look, I don't have time to meditate 20 minutes a day. He goes, okay, then make it 60 minutes a day. Right. That means you need it. You need to do that because you're so stressed all the time that you don't have time to take care of yourself. And so many people are in that mindset right now.
Right. We talk about this too. It's like we said that anyone can work out for an hour at a time. It's what you do with the rest of the 23 hours and what you put on that plate for the rest of the 23 hours is really what matters too. So yeah, if somebody says I don't have time, then they've got to make the time. They need it. Yeah.
I think one of the problems is we take for granted the importance of some of these, right? We take it for granted. And I think people do have busier lives. They're sleeping less. It's harder to make a sort of living wage. I actually think people do have less time, right? It's hard. So, but that's the challenge, right? How do we build in activity into your life? How do we do the least amount possible just to get started? Life won't always be that hard, right? Life won't always be hard, but where can we start? I think that's like the critical question, and how can we frame that mindset? It's not all or none. It's not like you're starting or you're not starting. It's, you're starting, but let's start with something you can do. Like you said, you're on that rebounder in your basement. I mean, that's a start. What do you need to do that? 5 minutes and a, $100 trampoline?
Right. And the journey starts with habits, with changing habits. And then you need purpose. So it's the journey, give me purpose, and then I'll work. And then it's the hard work, so, but for that point, we need community, we need purpose. And for me, it's my family, it's my faith, and my friends. So that's my triad, and that's very important. And to both of your points, you talk about exercise. I found that exercise has been so much more of a mental health tool for me and a positive aspect. That's an unsung hero of exercise, is the mental health benefit.
That's a huge point too. And what you're talking about, those things, family, faith, friends, we miss out on that. And when we don't have that, right? It's funny. I just gave a talk yesterday to a small church group, and we were talking about oxytocin, how important it is. And the question that always comes up is like, what drug can I take to increase my oxytocin levels? It's like, laugh with your friends, go have fun, walk your dog, go do something you enjoy. Like, so many people, I ask them yesterday, I had three new patients. I asked them, hey, what do you do for fun? And they all look. It's like a trick question every time. Like, I don't really have fun. I'm working all the time. I'm busy. It's like, well, you want your oxytocin to go up? Relax, take it easy a little bit, go for a walk, go, make fun of Tro, whatever you got to do to raise your feel good chemicals. But it's really, really important. We've lost sight of that because we feel like if we're not doing something, we're being lazy and we're wasting time, and we got to be productive all the time. Us docs, we all know that. In law enforcement too, you're busy all the time. You always got new cases, new things you got to look into. So it's hard sometimes just to take a breath and relax. And I'm telling you, it does make a difference. And Mark Cucuzella, we were just at a conference. He said, what's the number one indicator on these long-term study of cardiovascular disease in men? The biggest indicator of longevity was social engagement, social contacts. It wasn't what their cholesterol level was, necessarily what their sugar was, but those may correlate with being more engaged with other people. But it's the people who are selfish and self-centered and all that. It's just not good for you to be like that all the time.
Not at all. So
hopefully Tro's listening.
Yeah. And Tro was talking about, how busy we are and making time for everything like that. And sometimes we need to take a break from that chaos from a little bit, right? We need to disengage, embrace like our inner silence. I'm an only child, so I don't have any brother. I didn't have any brothers or sisters. And I was, I embraced my friends, but sure as heck, I spent a lot of time by myself. And to this day, I have no trouble just sitting in silence, talking, rediscovering like my inner peace, and then just reflecting. And then maybe that was because I had no brothers and sisters and nobody around me. But I spent a lot of time just being quiet. And I still do that to this day. Maybe that's my form of meditation. I don't know, but
well, and that's an important point, because there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And there's a different physiologic effect of that. So if you're alone and you go, hey, I like the solitude, I can just sit here, like, sometimes when I'm driving to Arizona by myself, it's like I can put on whatever station I want. I don't have to like check with anyone. I can put the car temperature where I want it. And so there's a peace in that, like not having to have conversations sometimes when you have conversations all the time. So yeah, and if you enjoy that, there's nothing wrong. Some people are just not social butterflies, and that's okay. You don't have to be at every party, but you go, okay, I need engagement with people, and I need to be at peace. And if it's listening to the waves crash on the ocean, or listening to a stream, or going for a hike or whatever, it does make a difference. And so many people miss out on that, of just having those moments of saying, you know what, I don't have to worry about the taxes right now. I'm just gonna, and especially now, I mean, I find myself in that. I look at stuff and I go, look at the crime rate. I saw the price of gas in San Diego, $7 a gallon now, and you go, man, like you can sit there and stress about all this stuff and go, okay, let me go hang out with my buddy and have a good time and not worry about it right now.
Yeah,
I think that's another thing, it's like stress reduction. I mean, there's some general principles that we know in medicine, talk to a good listener, counselor, priest, family member, loved one, right? Another one is, exercise, right? 30 minutes of exercise, a great way to improve mental health. Not self-medicating. That's another great, like universal tool. Like don't self-medicate with, alcohol, food, or drugs. And those are those things. There's no standardized curriculum, but we know some certain things. And I think, part of that is, and then as the stresses, these chronic stresses, we have to take a step back and figure out, okay, what changes do we need to just accept? What can we fight against, and what can't we fight against? I mean, your taxes, good luck fighting that. I mean, or get a good attorney and good accountant, but sometimes, you got to figure out, what am I fighting against and what am I not fighting against? My preference is to, I've made that determination in my head, Brian, and it's fight always, so just so you know. So it is a peaceful, in fact, I'm going to Obesity Week in October, and I'm going to fight.
Oh, those poor guys again.
Boy.
I'm going to
my
fight.
Goodness.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to fight.
You're going to get kicked out?
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see. I'm going to record it all, though, so,
Oh, my gosh.
so that'll be fun.
Yeah. But,
Bob,
yes.
I want to come back to you. So
Okay.
How, you read Tim Ferriss, and, but your version of your health must have changed over the past, 6-7 years. What would you say is the biggest change in the past 3 years or 4 years, sort of later in your journey, before the keto honeymoon and intermittent fasting and exercising honeymoon? Where's your journey now in the past couple of years?
So there's no such thing as autopilot on this journey. So I'm always learning, trying to learn. But now the key, I try to focus on helping people. And you kind of, obviously my background in the Lions Club. So really, that started a few years back. And, I've been service oriented my whole life, and even in the volunteer fire department, but I've been a Lions Club member for almost 20 years now. And, it's just a worldwide service organization. And so I try to talk about the diabetes awareness. And, if I can, I'll talk about that for a moment right now. So throughout my journey, and after my journey, my weight loss, there was about a year and change into it. Our local district, our local area, the district governor approached me and asked me if I was willing to be part of a diabetes awareness team for Lions Club. And I was a little bit unsure, but what she ended up doing was, look, she goes, I want to introduce you to somebody else who you were on a separate journey, but you were on similar journeys. Somebody else who lost some weight, but has gone through some positive metabolic changes. And she introduced me to this fella, John Winnicky, who's on our Lions Fit for Life website. He's on there as well. So John and I chatted, and we both agreed that, hey, we would take up this challenge to be the diabetes awareness people for our area, but only if we could do it our way. We wanted to do it our way in terms of addressing it a little bit differently than maybe the rest of the country, the rest of the way that other Lions do this, other than awareness. We wanted action. So we came up with this idea of Lions Fit for Life. And we reapproached that district governor and said, we'll do it, but only if we could do it our way. And this is what it encompasses. It encompasses talking about a low carb lifestyle, therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, things like that. And the district governors went with it. So that was 2018, and we've been doing it since. And that's how, that's the next iteration of us helping people. It's been, I couldn't say we met a little resistance at first from our home, the international group, because we were approaching it in a different way. But that's why we kind of had to change some of our logo and address it as we did. But we've been doing this now, and I've become very vocal and talking to other people in the community about this. I presented at the fitness clubs. I presented at Lions Club conferences, all about this lifestyle. And it's a hard thing to change. People are used to, hey, eating their certain food groups. I'm Italian and Irish. So I grew up with having pasta, bread, potatoes, all that good stuff. And some people, it's very difficult to give up. I know. And, but everybody's journey is different. And we tell them, this is what we've seen, the results we've seen, and what we kind of preach. And, habits are hard to break, but if you stick with it, this is what we do. And so that's how we became involved with Lions Fit for Life. We created Lions Fit for Life, and it's been a good journey. And the new district governors over the past few years have asked me to stay on to continue to do this. So this is my thing now. As long as they'll have me, let me do this, I'll keep on doing it.
It's amazing that you're giving back sort of to the community and volunteering and sort of helping people the way that you needed to be helped. That's definitely admiring.
And I would be remiss to say, I'll tell you what, again, I mentioned community before, but this community has been so supportive between all the doctors, all the nutritionists in this community, going to the Keto Symposium in New York City, going to Low Carb Boca, meeting Tro and Brian. I didn't even actually talk about how Tro and I connected. So I'm gonna talk about this for a moment, Tro.
Yeah, we got to hear it.
All right. So I think Tro shared this before. Back in, I think it was December 2018, there was a local newspaper did an article on him and about this doctor in Rockland County who lost all this weight.
Hey, spandex running suit.
Yes,
yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
Those are great pictures, by the way, Troy. I like that.
So I saw this in the local paper, and I got, and I've already, been through my journey a year and a couple months, and we've been started Lions Fit for Life. I said, I got to connect with this guy somehow. And I messaged him on Facebook, and I think it was like January of 2019 or something thereabouts. And the guy responds to me, and he says, "Can I call you?" I go, "Yeah." And I'm thinking, like, this is at 10 o'clock at night. I'm thinking, oh, he's going to call me next day. Whatever. He calls me 10 o'clock at night through Facebook Messenger. And that's how Tro and I met. I told him what my journey was and what our mission is, Lions Fit for Life. And he said, I'm all in. Whatever you need, I'll do and help. So that's how our connection began. And it's been great support. great friend, great practice, and meeting his wife and everybody that works in the office. And then on the bigger aspect, when you talk about meeting people, you talk about Chris Cornell, biggest comeback. He lives not far, an hour from me. And then eventually low carb beast, Vic Basmagian.
Mm-hmm.
So Vic and I, we're I call him my brother from another mother. So Vic and I are very close. I actually went up to see him in Canada last year.
Yeah, I love the pictures. That was awesome. Yeah, stuff like that, building that community, making relationships is really key.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So there is no shortage of friendly faces in this community and to support each other.
Yeah, I think that's another thing. When you're sort of against the grain, so to speak, we have to find a little tribe to make sure that we can help people heal. I mean, I've talked about this a lot, Brian. We've been on these boards before, or these groups of docs who talk about sort of low carb nutrition, and I've been on these email groups for years. And 5-6 years ago, I remember there was an email, maybe we should form a committee on the AAFP. And I was like, the AAFP, the people who took money from Coca-Cola, does that make sense to you all? And there was this discussion, maybe we should join the ACLM, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, the people who are literally sponsored by the Seventh-day Adventists and, are basically anything other than veganism is a sin. So, and I was very clear, like, we don't have a home. We got to make that home. Low Carb MD has been a home. Our practices have been a home for many people, and the SMHP is a home for people. Nutrition Network is a home. And so working together with these groups has been such an honor. You mentioned all those people we've talked to, Brian. It's just been an absolute honor to talk to each one of them. And now I got to be honest, Bob, it's an honor to be friends with you, talk with you. This is the beauty, every week we get to do this, Brian. We're privileged.
Yeah, it's so much fun. It's awesome. And Bob, how do people track you down, man? That want to join you, figure out what you're doing, right? Social media, whatever.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Lions Fit 4, the number 4 life on there. And so I'm always posting, trying to remain positive. And so I'm all over those platforms. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's great to have positivity out there. You, Chris Cornell, all these people that we see, Vic, obviously, it's really good to see that, because it seems like everyone's out trying to find a battle these days, and sometimes it's nice to say, okay, here's what I'm doing, do what you want to do. Like, it's amazing how people get so tribal about what they're doing and what needs to be done, and like, I've learned over the years that what works for someone else may not work for you, and you have to keep making adjustments and figuring it out, But doing what you're doing with exercise and lifestyle and reaching out to other people, all these things are all positive things. And like I say when I give my talks, like, I've never met a person yet who says, when I was stressed out and bitter, everything was great, and then I got relaxed and I started having fun with people and everything fell apart. Right? It's always the opposite. Because stress is the killer. Tro and I have talked about that from day one, being stressed, intense, and, self-centered and all these things. It's just doing what you're doing and helping other people. There's a joy that other people just cannot fathom to understand, that you do it for the desire to help your fellow man rather than making a few bucks here and there.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Absolutely. Amen.
Yep. So.
Amen. Tro, what do you have to add, man?
No, that's it. Just happy to have you here, Bob. I'll be seeing you soon. I think all of us are going to, well, Brian, you come to Boca this year or no?
I don't think they're letting me come this year.
Yeah. San
they're
Diego,
making me stay on the West Coast. I do San Diego. And
you do San Diego, I do New York.
Utah, and things like that,
Yeah.
I guess they don't let me cross the Mississippi or something.
Yeah.
Brian, I may be in San Diego in April, so I might reach out to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There. Yep.
Absolutely. I'll either be here or Arizona, but if you're going to be in town, I'll be here.
Okay.
All right, guys. Good. Listen, have a good one. It's always a pleasure. Thank you to all the listeners. Thank you to all the Patreon supporters, the people in our practices who help us do what we do. I cannot tell you, there's no way Brian and I can do this podcast, can focus on research, can volunteer to speak. We can't, figure out ways to work together without support from everybody who's listening. So we appreciate literally everybody's support. Brian, Bob, I cannot thank you enough for coming again and sharing your story. I know you've been through a lot, but you inspire me, so I know you're going to inspire a lot of other people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks for joining us.